What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we are going over some injury news, injury updates, just so we can help prepare you for your drafts. I'll be going through all of the big name players of note, letting you know the latest update we have on their injuries or what's holding them off the field, and letting you know exactly how that impacts our rankings or if we're still drafting them or not. Before we do get into the video though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which team last season had the lowest passing touchdown percentage. The correct answer was the Carolina Panthers. Hamandro Grisk, you got this one right. As for today's stat of the day, removing Lamar Jackson's passing statistics last season, looking at only his rushing numbers, if he were an actual running back, where would he have placed? We are going to be looking for a running back ranking of half PPR, so let us know in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, if you have not yet had your draft, consider signing up for our draft package. We have player breakdowns on all draftable players. You'll get access to our rankings, sleepers, targets, busts. We have offensive line rankings, consistency charts, risk ratings, and more. So if that's something that interests you, go to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. The link, as always, is in the description box below. With all of that out of the way, let's hop right into the video, and I think it's fitting that we start with Joe Mixon. This one was kind of sprung out of nowhere a bit, and right now he is being held out of camp due to what's reported as migraines. In a vacuum, migraines would be a better injury to have in training camp than something like a groin or a hamstring injury, but the only difference is right now Joe Mixon is looking for a new contract. We can't be 100% certain that these headaches or migraines have anything to do with a potential holdout. While he's not holding out officially, it is something that we do have to keep in the back of our minds. Head coach Zach Taylor has come out and said that he does expect Mixon to return somewhat soon and that contract talks are still ongoing. Now, that really would be positive news for us, but the fact that he even used both of those two things in the same sentence, while both very applicable to what the media probably was looking for in regards to answers, it does leave the door open to those possibly having some sort of correlation. Now, that's definitely speculation and we shouldn't read too much into that. We could drive ourselves crazy just reading into these types of news blurbs too much. So what we did, we just dropped Joe Mixon in the rankings a little bit. He's still an RB1. We have removed him off of players to target just due to the fact that there are so many solid running backs that you can draft in that range. There are many good options. You don't need to take additional risk by drafting a player like Joe Mixon who has moderate upside but would really surprise us if he even had the potential to finish as a top 2 or 3 running back. So if you opt to choose another running back in this range just due to the news, we can't really blame you for that. Moving on down the list, we go over to Kenyan Drake, who is in a precautionary walking boot. Typically, precautionary and walking boot, they don't really go hand in hand. But it is true this time last season, Kenyan Drake was also in a walking boot. The team has also come out and said it's not to be of major concern for his availability for week 1. Kenyan Drake has also been seen running since being placed in the walking boot, so not to be of any major concern or any reason to drop him significantly in the rankings. If anything, you could boost or increase your draft shares for Chase Edmonds, who is a viable backup, and we have seen him perform as an RB1 when given the full reins to this offense. But for us, we did not drop Kenyan Drake in the rankings at all. He's still a player we would love to target in that range, but if his situation worsens by the time we do get to our drafts, he is someone you definitely want to be keeping an eye out for. We do have another very similar situation with Miles Sanders, who is listed as week to week after suffering a lower body injury. All reports, though, from the Philadelphia camp are that he should be ready to go week 1. The team has come out and doubled down on his workhorse type of role. They did not bring in any significant veterans, which would be a sign that they were concerned with his availability for week 1, but all signs and everything that we have heard coming out of camp suggest otherwise and that he will be ready to go. So we can't recommend that you drop him in the rankings. If you do get any sort of draft day discount on him from players who may be scared to take him because of this injury concern, take whatever value presents itself to you. If you're just trying to avoid risk all the way through and through, also don't be afraid to draft the guys that you like when drafting in the first round, which is likely where Miles Sanders is going to fall, maybe top of the second round. There are still plenty of good options at the running back position. It's unlikely that pivoting from Miles Sanders to somebody like Josh Jacobs is ultimately going to be the reason that your team doesn't make it to the fantasy playoffs. So draft the guys you like. If you are trying to be risk averse, I could understand avoiding Miles Sanders, but he just has much more upside than a lot of players going in this range. So for us, we're not avoiding him for this reason. In all signs out of camp and from what they've been saying, they haven't brought us all that much concern. A player in injury that's very concerning has to be David Montgomery and his groin injury. I suggest that you go and watch the video if you haven't seen it already. It's floating around Twitter. This was a non-contact injury. It looked as though David Montgomery, his leg slipped out from under him, strained his groin, and now he's listed as being out for about 2 to 4 weeks. This is definitely the type of injury that could linger or potentially even worsen if they rush him back. I don't expect him to be ready to start for week 1 against Detroit. It would be smart for them to play it safe, but the problem is that the Chicago Bears, they don't really have a ton of depth, at least not at the running back position. Tariq Cohen should see a boost in early season production due to him being out, but it's not as if Tariq Cohen is going to be any sort of bell cow back. He's just not built for that. He is a satellite back, but his snap share overall is likely to increase, at least in the early weeks while David Montgomery is nursing and coming back from this injury. For me, that's still not a reason to target Tariq Cohen, at least not heavily. Yes, if he falls to me, he might be a player I would consider over some others in that range. But I prefer to draft running backs that have a realistic path to being a workhorse. Tariq Cohen, realistically, he doesn't have that even in his wheelhouse. When David Montgomery is able to return, though, he will be the workhorse back, so nothing's really changed there, but his risk of injury or risk of re-injury is going to be heightened. We have dropped him in the rankings, we have removed him as a player to target, and depending on how far he falls in drafts and how far people actually do drop him in their own personal rankings, he may come in at an actual value, but it's really tough to say. The news has come out recently. There isn't going to be a ton of times for ADP to really adjust, so you're going to have to play it by ear. There are going to be people in your league that may not even be aware that he suffered this injury, and they may draft him where he was going pre-injury. In that case, we just can't recommend drafting him at all. But if he falls outside the top 30 running backs and you do miss him for about 2 to 4 weeks even after the season starts, and then he comes back and by midway through the season you have a workhorse rusher on what should be an improved offense, that could be a very valuable pick. So play it by ear, know your league, find out where he's going and where you're willing to invest the draft pick. That accounts for all of the risk in taking it. Up next, we have Chris Carson, a player who we have loved taking where he's been falling in drafts just due to the expected workload, but he had missed 9 of 11 practices. Now, most of those misses have been noted to have something to do with personal issues, losses in the family, so we can't hold that against his overall health, but we knew coming into this season he wasn't going to be his healthiest. All reports, though, coming out of camp are that he is expected to be a full go for week 1, and with that being the report, we can't drop him in the rankings or change anything from what we expect, because that was all the news that we had heading into the offseason, and everything is lining itself up to be exactly as we had expected. And if he's ready to go week 1, he's an excellent value for where he's going in drafts. The final RB we have is Sony Michel, who raised some questions on what his availability would be to start the season. We know the Patriots did sign Lamar Miller, which was a sign that they needed depth at the position. The only player that was really concerning for injury was Sony Michel, so this was an indicator that he was possibly not going to be ready to start the season. But it's looking as though Sony Michel is going to be healthy. While he was out, Damian Harris was leading this team in snaps and reps, and from all reports, looking very good. We still do want to target Damian Harris over Sony Michel. You're getting him at a value. I believe Sony Michel is going to come at a higher price tag on draft day, especially with the news that he's healthy. But we have seen Sony Michel. It has not been pretty. Top 10 in overall touches does not equate to top 30 running back production when it comes to Sony Michel. Damian Harris, he provides some potential upside. He's also much better in the receiving game. We have had reports that he has also shown the chops in picking up blocks as well. So for a running back that could potentially do it all, target Damian Harris late in drafts. Even if Sony Michel is healthy, do not make that a reason to be targeting him. Let your other league mates target him and draft him, and just take the value that falls to you in running back Damian Harris. Let's move over to wide receivers, and there aren't as many wide receiver injuries of note to really go over. You do have AJ Green, who returned to practice after suffering a hamstring earlier back on the 17th. We know the team is taking the route of playing it safe when it comes to AJ Green, so to have him back in whatever capacity is a good sign for his availability week 1. I strongly believe he will be available week 1, but that wasn't really the major concern in us avoiding him on draft day. What was the concern was that he was already suffering these soft tissue injuries yet again. AJ Green himself has only played in just 9 games since the start of the 2018 season. Very concerning. For him to already be suffering these injuries and not having shown an ability to play for a sustained period of time, it is very concerning for his availability throughout the season. While on the field though, I do expect him to perform very well. Does that mean we're going to draft him? We're typically going to avoid him, but I will say that where he's currently going in drafts, it does provide some value if your goal is to just maximize the total upside on your team. But for us, we're trying to opt into drafting players in that range that do have a similar amount of upside but may have a much safer floor and have a much stronger chance at being a reliable and startable asset on our team through about halfway through the season and into the fantasy playoffs. Up next, we have Diontae Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who has missed the last 5 practices with what's reported to be a calf injury. For those of you that have been following the channel throughout the offseason, you know Diontae Johnson was definitely one of our favorite late round picks. Unfortunately, we have dropped him in the ranking and removed him as a target just due to missing these valuable reps. More so than just him recovering from the injury himself, you have to factor in the chemistry that he's trying to build with Ben Roethlisberger, who was not the starting quarterback on the team last season when Diontae Johnson performed his best. These reps, they're valuable in building chemistry. We can make claims all offseason long about Diontae Johnson possibly being the second most talented receiver on this roster, but no matter what, we know the receiving weapons for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are very deep. There is another receiver who is willing to step up and get those reps and develop that chemistry. That receiver is going to have a leg up to start the season, and Diontae Johnson is seemingly going to be playing catch up. This does not make him undraftable by any means, but we have now dropped him to the wide receiver 41. The final players to go over are going to be the San Francisco 49ers receivers. You have Deebo Samuel, who we know had the Liz Frank injury, about a 10-week recovery time, pushing his week 1 availability to a very tight time frame. The 49ers shouldn't have a ton of motivation to rush him back. They're better off just making sure that he's healthy. That way, with their playoff aspirations and potential Super Bowl aspirations, they'll have one of their best receiving weapons available. Unfortunately for them though, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Hurd, 2 of the other top receivers in this offense from the wide receiver position. Hurd, he's out for the season. Brandon Ayuk is now dealing with a hamstring injury himself. Ayuk is week to week, which means he is a sleeper at best, but definitely someone you should lower in the rankings. And this makes virtually any receiving weapon outside of George Kittle borderline undraftable. The team already spreads around the ball consistently to all of their receiving weapons, so it's unlikely that a receiver is going to step in and just perform as a wide receiver 2 or better. So I'm not here looking to catch lightning in a bottle with one of these receivers that they bring in either through free agency or move up the depth chart, because they're going to be temporary solutions. Deebo Samuel, he will be back and healthy. Brandon Ayuk as well, although he is week to week, he will be healthy as well after a few weeks. So for us, it's just a situation right now we should overall be avoiding. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.